I'm just, my friends, just wait for maybe another 30 seconds. Wait for maybe another 30 seconds. All right, now can you hear me? Wait for maybe another 30 seconds. All right, now can you hear me? Wait for maybe another 30 seconds. Okay. Are we good now? Can you people hear me well? Can you people see me well? Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I was being asked by our backend team to, because our room is more than full and that we are full to the capacity right now. And there are many people out there who wanting to be a part of this webinar. So I've been requested by my backend team to take our webinar live onto the YouTube. So we are right now live. And I hope by going live, this would benefit more people. Now, first, if you want to understand how to thrive in any situation, especially in a situation of crisis, we need to understand what do we really mean by thriving. This may sound like a repetition for all of those people who've been keenly following our webinars, but all of those people for whom this is the first time to be attending this webinar, there is a quick recap of the previous webinars. It won't take me more than 5 or 6 minutes. Because without understanding this very basic, we won't be able to get to the point of thriving. And how thriving is always our conscious choice that we pick. As a human being, all of us are blessed with 4 faculties, 4 resources. Whatever we call as us, we've become quite entangled and engrossed with these 4 resources and have gotten confused. It is fundamentally called as an illusion or a maya. And we consider ourselves as a body, as a mind, as the intellect, and as the energy. Basically, we have these 4 faculties. We have a body, we have a mind, we have the intellect, and we have the energy. These 4 faculties are available to us for use. But when we are unable to use these 4 faculties consciously by choice, it is exactly the analogy of a farm. If I will not go out to the farm and actually cultivate the land and sow the seeds and sow the plants of my choice, weeds will grow, because the nature of life is such that something will happen. Without something happening, this creation does never exist, because creation never ever comes to a stop. It doesn't know how to come to a stop. What we right now feel in the cosmos as inactivity is actually now certified that it is intense activity. It is an activity which human beings right now cannot even perceive. So the point here is, if we will not use these 4 faculties out of our conscious choice, these 4 faculties will still be put to use. And when these 4 faculties are put to use, they will work on the basis of a certain program. It is exactly like if the FM is playing and you do not have the ability to switch the tuner, the FM will continue to play. There is a broadcast that is happening. The unconscious life will continue if conscious life is not pressed into action. Whenever we will use these 4 faculties, we will start getting the conducive results, the desired results. Now, accidentally, a lot of us get the desired results. You see, the old rule is, if you do the right things, you will get the right results. If you do the right things accidentally, even then you will get the right results, but that will be accidental in nature. The entire idea of success is developing our ability to do the right things consistently. We are not here to be slaves. We are here to be masters. Human beings have that amazing possibility within them. And those who are unable to use that particular possibility to have that mastery over their own life, we are not really concerned about creating mastery over other people's lives. When we try to create mastery over other people's lives, especially those people who are married, they know it really well. It never happens. And those of us who aren't married and who have children, they know it even more. And and if your life is not taught you this, that you cannot attain mastery over life, over other people, you cannot fix other people. Look at the current situation around you. You are struggling to breathe properly. Just one twist and things can change. The only and only possibility that we people have in our life is to establish mastery over ourselves. These four faculties are what are available to us. If and only if we want the success, the kind of success that we desire, we have to become closer to our core intent. Our success, our joy, our happiness actually depends on our intent. Same action by a person who is mindful of the intent and a person who is not mindful of the intent, same action results in entirely opposite feelings. One gets satisfied, one gets happy, one creates even higher dissatisfaction levels. The use of four faculties does not mean how to use my hands. Use of body does not mean how to twist my body. That is a small part of it. The use of mind does not mean how much intellect can I use. A lot of highly stupid people can be very intelligent. Bulk of the misery that is created on the planet is not created by foolish people. It is created by intelligent people. Intelligence and wisdom are completely different things. Similarly, intellect, beliefs and convictions, our ideas that we have formed about our life, these are leading to more violence than integration. There are more conflicts amongst people who are intelligent. Look at the levels of likes and dislikes that people end up creating because of the intellect that they carry. Mind is a producer of multiple desires, multiple emotions, and multiple thoughts. And then we come to energy. Every single day, every human on the planet is struggling with varying levels of their energy. You have to compulsively sleep. And doctors are also prescribing you have to sleep for 8 hours. Have you seen the birds, the bees? How many hours do they sleep? In this nature, everything is on. Whatever can actually manage their energy really, really well will require rejuvenation only for a little period of time. This is how we are created. This is how this human being is designed. Mind, body, intellect, and energy. These are the four faculties that we have been blessed with. But what we are referring to as using them is not just their gross use. We are referring to going deeper down to your intent. If at the intent level we become conscious, only then you actually get the kind of results that you desire in your life. It is not that man or a woman that we are after. It is not that big house or big palace or big businesses that we are after. It is something else that we are after because we feel we will generate something as a feeling, as an emotion due to acquisition or possession of that particular success. It is that we are after. Unless we are mindful and completely conscious of what we are after, why are we doing what we are doing? Unless that question is comprehensively answered, we are going to be just wanderers. You go through any kind of goal setting theories, you become the best person on the planet in terms of achievement of goals, you will still lead a life that makes you suffer no ends. Unless and until you are closer to your core intent. Either you can be conscious about your intent or you will live unconsciously. I wish to share with you people a small, I'm sharing the screen here. Okay. So this is my attempt at sharing, and I hope I am able to do this. Okay. Can you help me, please, with sharing of the file that? What happened? Why do you want to share Dropbox? No, Google Drive here. Thank you. You have magical hands. Google Drive. No, it's. No, this is. Okay. So I'm unable to right now share the file, and let me just talk about it.
Is this the PowerPoint that you had shared?
It is, yes.
Would you like me to get it up?
Yes, yes, yes.
Let me try.
Yes.
Give me 1 minute.
So till then, I will share with you people what we call as an unconscious approach here. Whatever we are referring to as the unconscious approach, where we are not close to our core intent. Yes. The second slide.
Second slide.
Yes. Thank you. When we are not close, when we are not conscious about our core intent, our key driver in life becomes either one of these or all of these, combination of these: fear, greed, and lust. Fear is fairly simple for all of us to understand. Greed is nothing but a state of comparative life. When we live in a state of perpetual comparison, that state, the emotions produced out of that state of life are called as greed. And lust has extremely little to do with physicality. Lust primarily is a state where we are living with an intense need to prove, whether to prove to other people, to the world, to my parents, or to myself. When that need for proving becomes one of the key drivers, we say we are driven by lust. And it can happen a million times for any person in any period of time. We can sometimes be driven by fear, sometimes by greed, sometimes by lust. And do not worry about the magnitudes because they keep going up and down like a wave. So long as they are out of our control, they just come in at any time. That simply means we are leading an unconscious life. Whenever we will be driven by fear, greed, or lust, we will automatically be, even if we are creative people, we will be creating to hoard. We will hoard things, whether they are degrees, they are certificates of intelligence, they are certificates of our achievements, they are our friends, they are love that we get from the family, approval from the parents. Whatever we are getting, we are just accumulating these things. These are called accumulations. And these accumulations are in turn only to prove to other people about our greatness. And we need to be great. That means other people are not as great. This approach is called as an exclusive approach. Exclusive approach simply means everything is about me, an approach that excludes other people from my life and works only towards glorifying me. Whenever we are not close to our core intent, automatically, like weeds, the unconscious will take over. And whenever we will be close to our intent, we will be doing things because simply we want to participate, because we are there. And when we want to participate, we will create to contribute. As we create to contribute, we will be creating platform for ourselves and for others so that everybody can really harness their platform, harness their potential. And as people harness their potential, automatically an inclusive approach that includes everybody in our lives that is created. Susan, can we move back to the first slide now? Now you will notice, because of an unconscious or a conscious approach, if one is unconscious, a failure dimension, this failure dimension I also call as a survivor's dimension. Why do I call it a survivor's dimension? Because whenever a human being will try and live in an attempt to survive, automatically you will find the failure is the starting point and automatically the ending point, because we are never going to survive, because that's the truth. Whatever ideas that we are right now living with will die over a period of time, because the world is changing, new ideas will come. Whatever convictions or beliefs that we are living with, they will be shaken, because beliefs and convictions are not our realizations. Whatever thoughts or emotions that we are living with, those will also undergo a change. And the body, of course, will die. Survivors are never going to survive. People who are living for survival, in any case, are going to fail, because that is their starting point. You do the right things, you get the right results. You do this kind of a thing, you are going to get that kind of a result. In a failure dimension or a survivor's dimension, the entire life is outward driven. It is an external approach. They are looking at everything that is happening outside. And when we look outside, what we encounter is uncertainty. When we look at uncertainty, the entire attempt is to seek authority and power. Why? Because uncertainty gives us chills. The entire attempt is to create certainty out of uncertainty. Fear or greed or lust become the key driver there. And because they are the key driver to start with, they start getting manifested here, and you accumulate as much authority, as much power as is possible. You're really not after money. You're really after authority and power. You want to wield influence over people. You want to wield influence over as much in this creation as possible. And that gives you feel, that gives you a sense of certainty. But the exact opposite comes true. The more authority and power is accumulated, the lust grows further, because the more authority and power actually give rise to greater degrees of fear, greater degrees of uncertainty. And this becomes a vicious cycle. In the current situation of crisis, people who've been living an unconscious life People who've been living a life rooted in fear, greed, and lust are the ones who are suffering the most. And when they suffer the most, two kinds of distinct behaviors emerge. The first behavior that they exhibit is of panic and consequent seeking control. They just want to seek control. And the other distinct behavior that they exhibit is foolhardiness. Unnecessary bravado. Oh, nothing will happen to me. This virus is not going to choose who it will infect and who it won't. But foolhardy people, because they're driven by fear, foolhardiness looks like courage, but foolhardiness isn't courage. All of this is happening, the failure dimension, the unconscious dimension, the survivor's dimension is happening simply because fear, greed, and lust are the primary drivers. Uncertainty is giving them a fear, a level of fear, a flared up fear, and consequently they want to turn uncertainty into certainty. And it never happens. It never ever happens. The romance of life is certainty, is uncertainty. It's like you are a sailor in the sea. The next wave, you don't know what kind of a wave will happen. But if you are balanced, as a ship is balanced, you will ride over any kind of a wave. Look at the success dimension. In success dimension, again, exploration is the starting point because every human, as in the failure dimension or the success dimension, exploration is something which is inherently built in all of us. Even as a small child, when we are born, we are always wanting to explore. We want to know what this world is about. We want to know what this life is about. In the success dimension, or we may call it the thriving dimension, the approach that is taken is inner approach. And the moment the approach is inner, when you go within, you look at your potential and you are amazed. You've got limitless potential. When you look at the limitless potential, you suddenly are enthusiastic. You want to do more. You want to use these four faculties more and more and more and more. But for not for the purpose of creating certainty, but for the purpose of riding the wave. You look at limitless possibilities thereafter. And when you look at limitless possibilities, you look at how timid we are, how tiny we are, how minuscule we are. Unless and until we will collaborate, we cannot innovate. We combine our resources with as many people as is possible. And that's when we reach the success, the desired success. And this cycle also becomes a virtuous cycle now. The first one is a vicious cycle, leads you nowhere. It is really like a dog chasing his own tail. And in the success dimension in which we thrive, we are still in circles, but we are in a circle that keeps expanding and growing and growing and growing and growing. This is called as the thriving dimension. The key to thriving is only how close are you to your own intent. If your own intent is unclear to you and if you remain unconscious, my friends, please understand, there's nothing wrong in being unconscious. The only thing is, you don't tend to your farm, weeds will grow, snakes will come, all creatures will come. If you're conscious about your farm, you will grow the kind of crop that you want to grow. As a human being, we are blessed with these four faculties. We can do with them whatever we want to do. But if we are not making that happen in our life, we are no different from being an animal. We are just living a programmed life. This has extremely little to do with the kind of education that we've been brought up in terms of psychology or neuroscience. This is not that area. What we are referring to is not conditioning. We are not referring to the kind of layers that have been added to your brain in terms of various convictions. We are referring to intent. That is deeper. I will give you an example of what kind of thing we are referring to. Imagine there are two kids who are infants, just 4 or 5 months old. Together as twins, they are in a cot. And there is a strong breeze which is blowing. and the curtain moves. Out of those twins, one child, just 3, 4, 6 months old, is suddenly fearful and the other child starts giggling. There is certain things which are embedded in us. We have to go deeper. Humans have the ability to go deeper. And unless we do that justice to our own life, we are merely existing, we are merely surviving, and we won't be able to survive. As long as we are alive, we need to do something with our life. These four faculties have been given to us not for the sake of mere survival. They've been given to us so that we can thrive as human beings. And the beauty, if we will thrive, automatically we will survive. In the current context of COVID-19, people are talking about philosophies. Do not let COVID-19 turn you into philosophers. Do not let this happen to yourself. We need to use the inner approach and we will sail through any situation of life, because it is we who have to use our mind. If we are using our mind, if we are using our intellect, automatically we will produce the kind of emotions that we wish to. Innovation is the most natural outcome of a human who is aligned in these four faculties of mind, body, intellect, and energy. It is not a rocket science. It is the most obvious outcome. You will innovate. Four faculties that I am talking to you about are like the four wheels of your car. One of these is not aligned, your entire car will wobble. You will meet an accident for sure. Disease is a state, and it is also mentioned in the texts of Ayurveda. Disease is a state of a human whose four wheels, one out of these four wheels, is also not aligned. People who are suffering from COVID-19 today, who've been infected, their body has been infected. The body has gone out of alignment. But the bulk of the humanity, their bodies are still safe. And taking care of the body is in entirely your hands. We just need to make sure that our mind does not get infected. And minds that are not conscious are perpetually infected because you're not cleaning them regularly. You're not doing what is needed to be done with your mind and intellect and energy. Automatically, you will be infected. One or the other crisis will get to you. We have the possibility of living a life where we thrive all the time. Why won't we use it? Why won't we thrive under every situation? Thriving through innovation can happen if you use the inner approach. There is no other way. Do not live in doubt. There is no other way. A lot of innovation can naturally happen for those people who are naturally aligned. Even if we are aligned in these four areas for some time, the most obvious observations start to happen in our life. Gravity was observed, relativity was observed. Nothing has been invented on the planet. We have only observed, discovered, or realized things. They have always existed. Innovation is an observer's outcome. And for you to become an observer, the four faculties have to remain aligned. Now I will share with you how you can align these four. These four can be aligned by following four steps. For those of you who are attending this or my webinar once again today, it may sound like a repetition. Do not mind the repetition. As many times as I will say, it is less. Because what I am asking you people to do is easy for me to ask, but for you to do is where the real challenge lies. Do not hesitate to ask as many questions related to its application. We will help you apply. Listen to these four steps very carefully. The first step, The first step is, while talking, I've forgotten the first step. What is the first step, Shalini? Let me refer to my notes. Friends, I'm like this only. Those of you who worked with me, they know this. Yes, the first step. You need to become present to your emotions. Your emotions right now are getting produced automatically, almost reflexively, almost compulsively. Not almost really. They are like that only. It's almost like anger just produced, irritation just produced, panic just produced. And now the present world is gloating in these kinds of production of compulsive emotions or programmed emotions. We are saying, you know what? I am suffering from anxiety disorder. Oh, ho, ho, ho. So let's make a club of all the people who are suffering from ADD or OCD. Why? You're suffering. You're not living a full life. You just need to do something with yourself. No other medical professional can help you. Only you have the ability to help yourself. Just a small switch inside your head and you will be able to rectify it. You are the master of your own life. How to attain that mastery? Step number one, start writing a diary. If you have to write that diary 10 times or 30 times in a day, do that. Write down every time you are present to your own emotion. In any situation, in any incident that is happening, just write down which emotion have I produced. Do not put the blame of your emotions on someone else or something else. Because he or she behaved like this, I got angry. Because he or she behaved like this, I am irritated. No. Take the responsibility of your emotion and write down, I produced irritation today. I produced anger today. As you will become present to your own production of emotions, you will gain that charge of your life, which you have right now given to other people. It is not other people, it is you who's producing these emotions. It is your factory which is producing these goods. And you're not even right now taking charge of the quality of goods that are being produced inside your emotional factory. So, first step, start writing down the kind of emotions that you produce. Take the responsibility for every single emotion that you're producing in your life. Do not give the credit to someone else. You produce your unhappiness, you produce your misery, you produce your happiness, you produce your joy. If any one of you will ever be interested in understanding the deeper dimensions of how we produce these emotions, more than welcome. In so much time, I can only talk about this. Have that faith. In 7 to 10 days, as you will start writing this diary, you will see a major shift in your life. You would have started taking charge of your own life. You can produce your desired emotions. You are right now producing undesirable emotions, and you have become helpless about it. Do not remain helpless. Take charge. Unconscious is almost like that that brat of a child, naughty child. The moment you, as a parent or as an adult, go and stand like this in front of them, what happens? They just stop. Your presence to the production of your own emotions will automatically make sure that that you are starting to take charge. Unconscious is exactly like this. You go into a farm, just the fact that you've stepped nearly 1.5 or 2 kilometers around in that radius, most creatures come to know that somebody is there. Now we must not go near that person. Unconscious is really like this. Step number one, start listing down on a daily basis. Start making that log of emotions that I produce. Every emotion you produce, make sure you are writing down which emotion you have produced. Susan, we can take off the slide now.
Sure.
The second step you do. You see, we are also suffering the economic uncertainty as of now. So to deal with economic uncertainty, do a simple step. How much money you need, you please write down. While all of us are sitting at home, most of us in the period of lockdown, when you will write down the kind of money you need, not want. Differentiate between the need and want. When you will write down, most of you will come up with a big relief because you really don't need much money. And the kind of savings you would already have probably would last you 3 lifetimes. So just make sure that you make a note of the kind of money that you require to fulfill your needs. With the kind of intelligence, the kind of mind that you possess, even if you have zero savings, making that kind of money for you to survive, to fulfill your needs, is not going to be a rocket science. We are all able people, able-minded people. And especially if you're able to make sure that your mind, body, intellect, and energy remain aligned, every single employer out there in the world will be looking out for you. People are looking for balanced people. They can do with less intelligence, but they cannot do with imbalance. You will be the innovator. You will be the observer. Make sure you have calculated how much money do you really need. The third step you do, and this may be very easy for you or it may be very difficult for you, but it cannot happen till you've done the first 2 steps. Once you've done the first 2 steps, the third step is you embrace uncertainty. You accept uncertainty as a reality. However elusive you remain, how much authority or power you gain, however much possessions or accumulations or wealth you may get, life will remain uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen tonight or tomorrow. You have just got no idea. You live only a little bit at a time. This moment, if you can live well, there is a possibility that you may live next moment. You will live next moment also well. Do not lose this moment attempting to create certainty out of uncertainty because it's never going to happen. The moment you will embrace uncertainty, you will be amazed at your ability to remain aligned. And the more alignment you will have in those 4 faculties, in those 4 wheels, you will be sailing smoother. We will still not know whether we will be alive tomorrow or not. But if we are alive, we'll sail much better. And if we aren't, in any case, it doesn't matter. Uncertainty needs to be embraced, not to be avoided, not to be feared. It is something that has been put into us since our childhood, that uncertainty is not good. Well, if we were to take uncertainty out of your life, you will be living the most boring life. Imagine if everything was to turn certain. Just imagine everything is certain. It won't be certain only for you. You see, if it will be certain for you, it will be certain for everybody. Right now, if it is uncertain for you, it is uncertain for everybody. And that is the romance of life. You don't know when you're going to propose to that boy or a girl. You just don't know whether they will say yes or no. And that's the beauty of it. That's when your heart beats, whether that person will say yes or no, whether that person will accept me or throw me. That's the beauty of it. Imagine if everything was to become certain. It's like going and watching the thriller movie, the end of which you already know. You don't want that kind of a life. The beauty of life is in uncertainty. Embrace it and learn to remain aligned. As you will embrace uncertainty, suddenly your core intent will be closer to you. You will now explore. You will no longer be a survivor. You will now include other people with you. You will no longer be wanting to prove to the world how great you are. Because in any case, great people, well, when we build their statues, only the pigeons come and drop their, you know what. You don't want to be great people. You want to be engaging people. You want to be a human being who lived well. And you cannot live well alone. You can live well only when you engage more with life around you. Uncertainty needs to be embraced. Now, the fourth step. If the first three preparatory steps have been done, the fourth step is what is going to actually make this happen. The fourth step is you need to breathe. When I say you need to breathe, I mean you need to breathe consciously. How do you do that? Right now, we are breathing, but we are breathing unconsciously. We are not aware of our and if we do not have the breath, where are we? The most vital thing that's happening in our life, we are not aware of it. Your alignment is happening because of your breath. Your misalignment is also happening because of your breath. If you will do what I am asking you, do it for 7 days, 10 days, and you yourself, don't forget to write me a message. Okay, this is a free webinar. The least you can do is write to me after those 7 or 10 days that, yeah, something is happening in my life. Suddenly I am feeling calmer. At least this much you can write. Do share your experiences. Don't be hesitant. 15 minutes 3 times a day is the prescription. Minimum 15 minutes. You do it for 14 minutes, no, it won't happen for you. Do not exceed 20 minutes because too much will happen and you won't be able to take it. Do it only for 15 minutes in one go. And this is not some kind of a weird practice I'm asking you to do. 15 minutes, you will sit. This is how your palms, if they are on your thighs like this, these are called open. If they are like this, these are called closed. You will sit with your palms open on your thighs, resting comfortably. You want to sit on a chair, on a couch, you sit wherever. On the floor, cross legged, you sit wherever. Keep your spine straight. That's the only thing. Your spine is straight, comfortably straight, and your palms are open, facing upwards. As you sit like this, your eyes are closed. You take your focus only to your breath. When you take your focus to your breath, you will not engage with your sensations in the nostrils. No, we don't want to engage because sensations keep happening. We don't want to engage in our sensations. You will go with your inhalation as deep as possible. And as you exhale, you will come out from that depth and you will go wherever the breath takes you. Become an observer. Just take your breath in. Just take your breath out. Every time you breathe in, every time you inhale, make sure you are going in with the breath. And every time you exhale, make sure you are coming out with your breath. 3 times, minimum 15 minutes. You can set an alarm. Do not do it for less than 15 minutes. Do not do it for more than 20 minutes. 3 times will mean if you do 15 minutes, 3 cycles, that will be 45 minutes. If you do 20 minutes, 3 cycles, that will be 60 minutes in total. You can have a gap of 4 to 5 hours. Should I be hungry before this practice? You don't need to be hungry. You don't need to be full stomach. You do it before each meal, before the breakfast, before the lunch, before the dinner. If you're really feeling hungry, just consume a couple of glasses of water. Your acid will come to, reflux will come to rest. Consume water and do this breathing. Just the breathing, nothing else. Remember, I am repeating. You just inhale, and when you are inhaling, automatically inhalation is happening. You will just go in with the inhalation. And as you exhale, you come out with the exhalation. Well, how will I do that? You just do it. You just do it. As long as you promise to do it, it'll happen for you. You don't worry, it'll happen for you. Just don't worry, it will happen for you. How it will happen for you? You share your experience, how it happened for you. You right now, I am appearing on your screen. You look at me. We'll be there for you. You don't worry, it will happen for you. Just breathe. Divine is one who can breathe consciously. Mediocre is one for whom breathing is happen unconsciously. If I want to become conscious about my core intent, the first step is to breathe consciously. Do this practice. Once the lockdown period will end, continue to do this practice at least twice a day. Breathing, that's all. You don't do this practice, you do any kind of psychology, you do any kind of logic, life won't work in this manner for you. You will continue to remain driven by your fears, your greed, and your lust. You will remain comparative in your life. Your decision will never ever be yours. It's not too much to ask. 15 minutes, 3 times a day. You don't focus on your nostrils. You don't focus on the sensations inside the nostrils. You don't focus on the heaving of the chest. You don't focus on any physicality. You just go in with your inhalation. You just come out with your inhalation. How it will happen for you? Just do this. Can I see raised hands? People who are getting it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Most of you have raised your hand. I promise it will happen for you. Just do this. Ask me any kind of question. You've got my email, you've got all the details. I'm available on the internet. I am an extremely private person. I am no kind of a guru. This is the most scientific thing that can happen for you. What is the science behind it? I do not have the time. We have Susan here, and now I turn to Susan. She has wonderful things to share with all of you.
Thank you, Samir. This will be a little bit of a shift in pace, or maybe not in pace, but in topic. What I was asked to do today was to think through how to deal with stress in times of economic uncertainty, or just in times of uncertainty more generally, given the current framework. And at first I wasn't sure that I had anything to say, but the more I thought, I found myself referring to history, and I found that I did have quite a bit to say, having lived through a number of different recent economic crises in a town that seems to feel them quite deeply. So what I think I'd like to share, just the broad framework, is the idea that times of economic uncertainty and times of uncertainty more generally are actually times of incredible opportunity. And I say that from my house in San Francisco. And I'll talk a little bit about that house later, sharing a personal story. But I want everybody to remember that many of the so-called tech unicorns of the now just lapsed market expansion did some of their most important and foundational work either during the dot-com crisis or the housing and financial crisis of 2008. We don't think about that terribly much, but a lot of the moves that were made in the middle of those crises actually paved the path for these companies later on. I think that the most vital thing we can learn from each of them is, and I think this is where Samir and I are saying the same thing, is to adapt and innovate while also keeping one's eye on the prize. And that prize might be, in Samir's words, one's core intent. This could be true of both personal and professional goals. Importantly, and I think this is true for me as well as a lot of other people right now, if there isn't much of a path towards work goals, I currently cannot do that much research in the days and weeks ahead, then it may be the perfect time to make progress on personal goals. The act of moving forwards towards at least one goal, personal or professional, should actually help reduce anxiety. I know it does for me. This is in part because it focuses you on things that are in your control, your own actions, as opposed to the thousands of things that are outside of your control and outside of everyone's control these days. Now, from a business perspective, if you have cash, this is an amazing time. It's an amazing time to hire. It's an amazing time. It's a great time to take out a lease. It's a great time to make strategic long-term investments. If you are not flush with cash, as many people may not be these days, it's still a great time to think about what you or your company does best and get to work on a new problem. This is especially true if you feel like accomplishing the work you had planned to do during this period is not going to happen. I assure you, and I think everybody feels this quite viscerally these days, that the world has many, many problems. I think that working towards solving one of them will certainly help the world, and it should help you as well by providing an outlet for the energy that you may be devoting towards anxiety at this point. But also because the people who solve pressing problems, and this is something that I have seen again and again in the Bay Area, the people who solve pressing problems are ultimately, if not immediately, rewarded for their efforts, I should say. So to provide some perspective on how to innovate and how to deal in times of crisis, I decided to do something that very few people do these days. I decided to delve into corporate history. There are, to be sure, few reference for what we face today. The last time the world faced what I would call a dual crisis, a health crisis paired with some other crisis, was actually during the Spanish flu epidemic over 100 years ago. Now, while there were financial or economic issues during that period of time as well, the main crisis that the world was facing was actually World War I, and that was thought to be a vector for the disease at that point. Now, I think we can all be really glad that we do not face a health battle and a real war at this moment. Instead, we just face a health-fueled financial crisis. I'm going to take a really quick look, in many ways just skating over the details, at how some notable companies have thrived as a result of their actions during two recent financial crises, with the idea that it may give you food for thought in terms of what your business can do right now or what you can do right now to give you or your business the best chance possible to come out of the crises we face today better than before, or better than you anticipated being. I would invite you, as I go through these examples, I would in fact suggest that you think about what it would take operationally and personally to make the choices that I described. So the first crisis that I'm going to go through, and I'm just going to talk about four companies you've all heard of. They are in many ways deeply biased towards my own experience, which is a very US focused experience, but they are all companies we have heard of. So during the dot-com crisis, I'm going to think really briefly about what Amazon, Google, Apple, and Priceline did. And then we will go forward and think about the 2008 financial crisis. Let's take a look at Amazon, a company that is, at least in the US right now, and from what I hear in India as well, doing a lot these days in some ways to help during the current crisis. But it started, and a lot of us forget this fact, as an online bookseller. Many of you may or may not recall, but it went public really early on in its lifetime in 1997, after having been founded in 1995. And despite making an early mistake in 1999, when Amazon actually attempted to get into the publishing business, something that most people have forgotten at this point, the company actually successfully diversified during the dot-com crisis. This is when it transitioned from books, from being an online bookseller, to a wider inventory, including CDs, DVDs, electronics. Now, of course, it's the company that sells everything today, but it wasn't always that. And I think it's important to remember that Amazon actually turned its first profit, all of $5 million on $1 billion in revenue, in the fourth quarter of 2001. This is shortly after the dot-com crisis, and certainly shortly after, and it wasn't even after, actually. It was in the middle of it. This was the fourth quarter of 2001. At a time when most internet-based companies were hemorrhaging money, Amazon actually managed to turn a profit by diversifying. Later, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit to the 2008 crisis, in the midst of that crisis, Amazon was relatively cash rich and made the bold move, I would say, of purchasing Zappos, the footwear company, for $850 million in 2009. These are not small steps to take in the middle of crisis. Now, let's take a really brief look at Google. Google, as many of you may recall, was founded in 1998, just really 2 years before the dot-com crisis, and almost immediately faced the crash. Google had never before monetized on its search engine. It was during the dot-com crisis that it started selling advertisements associated with keywords, something that we know well at this point. And that actually became the backbone of the business in the years to come. Apple made key investments during the dot-com crisis. So after Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company had previously been focused largely on the professional market and niche markets like education. But it waded back into the consumer market or in the lead up to the dot-com crash, and it continued that same trajectory afterward. So it introduced the Power Mac in 1999. And in the aftermath of the dot-com crash, it did not retreat. It actually released Mac OS X, which all of us know at this point, and that targeted professionals and consumers, importantly. In 2001, it opened retail stores. We all know the Apple Store today, and this was a way to better market its products. It also paved the way for its later consumer hits, the iPod, iPhone, and iPad. This type of investment in the middle of a crisis is unusual. And once again, I would invite you to think about what it would take to do this kind of thing when everybody else is retreating. Priceline primarily sold airfares at the beginning. Many of us may or may not remember that fact. It went public right before the crash and in fact struggled during the early dot-com or post-dot-com era. In the middle of a crisis, which is not something most companies are willing to do, it changed leadership, expanded its business then to include hotels, which ended up becoming a crucial part of its business model and its return to profitability, and of course added cars and other things after that fact. So moving on to the 2008 financial crisis, I'm going to think about what Facebook, Uber, Netflix, and Citigroup did during this period. So Facebook was completely unprofitable as the 2008 financial crisis hit. But it was during this time that created a monetization strategy based upon advertising for the first time. This included the addition of the all-important like button that everybody knows so well at this point in February of 2009. And it was in September of 2009 that Facebook first became profitable, 1 year into the financial crisis. It then made a number of key acquisitions before going public in May of 2012. Uber was a child of the recession in many ways. It was launched in May 2010, and it was originally a luxury ride-sharing company in the city of San Francisco. Now, this was probably a good choice for the company at the time, given that the recession had decimated the wealth of the middle class, and Uber was providing a discounted luxury service. Uber only launched regular cab services for the masses in May 2012, but this was still during a period when the US and most of the world was coming out of the recession. This also worked out to be well-timed as the recession waned, but the average consumer was still wary of spending. Netflix is an interesting example in part because it made similar choices in both of these crises. Netflix has been around since 1997, and it was actually losing money in 2000. In fact, offered itself up for sale to Blockbuster for all of $50 million. Thankfully, Blockbuster declined, and we all know what happened to Blockbuster. Business then picked up in early 2001 until the dot-com crash. Netflix struggled during that period, but fortuitously, the price of DVD players dropped during this period, and well-timed marketing campaigns allowed Netflix to take advantage of people's desire to save on going out and instead stay in and do something more cheaply. It increased subscribers dramatically during this period and went public in 2002, turned its first profit in 2003. It then pulled off a similar feat during the 2008 financial crisis, dramatically increasing subscribers once again, basically going back to its playbook, but also really increasing its base. The final corporate example I'll give you before turning to a personal example is Citigroup. Almost everybody knows that Citigroup was part of a group of companies that lost billions in the subprime crisis in 2008 and was forced into a US government rescue package as a result. Plenty of companies learned from their mistakes in this particular crisis, but more of them perhaps did not. Citi was one of the ones who did. Quickly changed its approach, forcing or asking executives to take limited compensation until the company returned to profitability. Once the bank was recapitalized, it actually paid back the money the US government had loaned it in the form of preferred shares, and taxpayers in the US earned about $12 billion on the investment. But Citi was not out of its own crisis. It still failed its early stress tests, a regulatory hurdle. Some banks chose to fail and not make significant investments, but Citi actually invested heavily in its own apparatus internally. And as a result, it is now thought to be one of the safest banks. It regularly passes stress tests. It's thought to be one of the safest banks in the US, even though it is not actually one of the most profitable. It is profitable, but not the most profitable. Finally, I'm going to give you a personal example of interesting moves in times of financial crisis. So the very house that I sit in right now was purchased in the middle of that financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis, at a time when I personally was not thinking about buying a house, but I purchased this house from my landlord, who had in fact made some moves that forced her to have to sell this house. And I was very fearful at the time of using what ended up being every penny that I had to make this purchase. But I decided to think of it as an adventure, and it is one that has, I think, paid off in spades, both financially and otherwise. But it was not an easy move to make, and I know that I certainly faced a lot of doubts in making that move, but it's one that I'm glad that I did. I'll talk really briefly now about the current crisis and an interesting news item that I have seen in the last couple of days. So Disney World, Disney, the corporation, has all of its parks closed right now for obvious reasons. It is losing significant revenue daily. Disney management has agreed to take significant pay cuts ranging from 20 to 50% to reduce expenses. It also announced yesterday that it is going to furlough workers starting April 19th. However, at the same time, just a few days ago, on March 31st, Disney purchased over 26 acres of land in Orange County, just to the west of its theme park there, right in the middle of a financial crisis. And one of the things that I think this demonstrates is a corporation and leadership that is both taking the right moves to ensure financial viability, but also looking towards the future. So what can we learn from this set of examples? For starters, the theme that runs through all of them is adaptation to context. Another key theme is taking advantage of changed circumstances instead of just being a victim of them. Some companies diversified, others doubled down, finding better ways to monetize their existing products. Still others focused on new products or new clients or new revenue streams. But importantly, none of the companies I just described was simply hunkering down and waiting for the storm to pass. Many made bold moves when others likely thought of them as foolhardy. I think it's also really important to note that the examples I just provided, and I'm conscious of this fact, are all of the macro innovation variety, involving big fundamental changes to how each company did business. One does not have to proceed in this manner. I don't think one has to be entirely outwardly focused. One can look inward to one's own company or even to one's own life or household and focus on doing what one already does better and more efficiently. And I believe that that will pay dividends in the long term. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, Samir had asked me to share my own perspective on the current times and how I'm thinking about them. So I'll add that now. From where I sit, and the world does seem to have closed in around me to some degree, the world does in fact seem to be in retreat at this point. Many have pulled back from activity, and to me, they seem quite a bit like turtles hiding in their shells when they're worried. I see this every day on the long walks that I take. Here in San Francisco, we don't have a complete curfew. We are allowed to go out alone to exercise, so I go out daily, and it's one of my favorite things about this particular time. I'm getting to see San Francisco again in a very different way. I'm getting to see it on foot at a slow speed rather than in a car or bus or a train. When I go on these walks, I meet people, and we have to do a little dance because we are required to stay 6 feet away from one another. I always greet people with a hello and a smile. And there's an interesting, there are two streams of people who greet me back. Some look away and almost seem to want to hide. So fearful are they right now of human interaction that they almost seem to run from me. But plenty of others seem actually thrilled at the opportunity to greet somebody, even if at a distance, and have found their own ways of being friendly and engaging while still being respectful of the rules. I've seen this far and wide, not just on my walks, people reaching out that I haven't heard from for ages. And I'm starting to think that this is part of the way forward. We need to stop retreating into our respective countries, into our respective homes, and find new ways to talk and work and play together. We need to adapt to context to do that. And when we do, I think we will find ways to solve our problems and come out of this crisis better people, better corporations, better families than those who went into it. So I will leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was beautiful sharing. So I believe there have been many questions that have been coming in. And friends, you're free to ask as many. Susan, may I begin with you?
Sure.
Let's start with a conversation. If you have noted down any questions that you had.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I have a couple. We'll see how far we get through them. The first one that I wanted to ask, you talked about intelligence and wisdom.
Yes.
And I wanted to have your perspective on how we can tell those apart.
Sure. Intelligence is available with every single human being. A lot of us, it's a function of the brain, really. A lot of us fill our intellect with a lot of information, and we confuse that with the act of using intelligence. People who are able to use their intelligence are the wise ones. And how do we differentiate between the two? What is that litmus test? Whether one is intelligent or one is wise. The one who is intelligent will have a keenness to prove how good, how bright, how intelligent they are. And the one who is wise will have a clear intent to help the other person's well-being and to help everybody around him or her realize their potential. At times uh, they will make sure that the other person uh, is making fun of even themselves. They will go to any extent, but their intent is always rooted in one thing, that their own potential and people's potential around them constantly gets realized. They're always interested in investing their lives in the well-being of people around. And the wiser they are, their intent becomes not just in the well-being of people around, but in everything around. So the litmus test remains this: uh, how inclusive is the person's intent, and how conscious are they of not operating through fear, greed, or lust. So the wise ones don't operate through the fear, greed, or lust. That's not their key driver. They're able to take charge of their life. Intelligence is available even in a dog or a cat. It may be seemingly limited, but let's say, a lot of times, Susan, we confuse intelligence with logic, with analytical ability. And humans' sense of smell is still unable to find out narcotics. Dogs are able to. So logical or analytical brain is available, I think, in a better measure with animals. And they are able to use it even way better than humans are able to. It is just that we are calling them animals and they are looking at us that they can't, humans can't even understand when the storm is coming. We have to use gadgets and machines. So we are confusing intelligence with logic and analysis. Our ability to use our entire brain, our ability to use all the four faculties, and all these four faculties become available for use in a harmonious manner only when we go beyond our own survival, and what's in it for me doesn't become or doesn't remain the primary motive. So every time we are using our intelligence, we must not gloat about it, because even an animal, even a dog or a cat or a bird is using their intelligence. And in fact, they are doing a better job at survival. Wise person also uses his or her intelligence, but their intent is conscious one. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely answers my question. Should I ask you another one?
Yes, please.
So you talked about core intent, and I found myself thinking, what happens if you have more than one, or you feel you have more than one core intent? And how does one resolve that? And imagining another scenario in which one has more than one core intent, maybe conflicts with another's. What should one do in that situation?
So it just doesn't matter whether you find one core intent or a million. There will never be a conflict. The moment you have realized your core intent, in different situations it will change. If you've heard stories about Krishna, have you heard stories about Krishna in Mahabharata?
I have.
So he was a friend with somebody, he was a brother of somebody, he was a husband to 16,000 women, so they say. So he was playing different roles. The moment you are a professor to your students, the moment you are a lover to your boyfriend, the moment you are a daughter to your parents, you are in different roles. And in each role, there may be a different intent that you have to fulfill. I still vividly remember my father was very deeply in love and very attached to me, extremely attached. We are three brothers and sisters, and two brothers, and so I have another brother and one sister. And he was attached to the maximum to me, although my sister likes to believe otherwise, but I am well aware of this. And he was so attached that if I had let him remain the way he was, he wouldn't have died, he wouldn't have left his body in a very conscious manner, in a very, I mean, he wouldn't have really fulfilled the purpose of his life. So during his lifetime, I behaved in certain unacceptable manners with him. And for 3 years, he suffered my absence in his life. But at the end of those 3 years, he he had evolved to such an extent that it was so nice that when he left his body, he could choose the time, the place, the date, and the manner in which he will leave his body. He could evolve to such an extent. But if he had remained so attached as he was, that wouldn't have been possible. He would have just lived a normal, mediocre survivor's life, a mortal life. And the life is mortal, but there is something else possible in our lives. So when I was functioning as a son with him, if my intent, my core intent remained love and affection, I probably wouldn't have been able to offer the possible evolution for him. But because my intent, my core intent at a very conscious level, uh, realized that my father needs to to another dimension, I played my role. So there will never be a conflict. You'll be able to play whatever role that you choose in your life with ease. There will be just no struggle.
That's great to hear. I think there are quite a number of questions in the Q&A section. Would you like me to transition to those?
Yes, let's do that.
Let us look. All right. So the first one I see here says, and this is from Sandeep Sharma, says, today I was chatting with a friend from college. I found him resistant to evolution. During this time, I came up to realize, I think, that the difference between evolution and mutation is willingness. Unwilling changes, I termed it as mutations, and willingness to change is evolution, but he needs your help to understand.
Yes, the big difference is, Sandeep, you're right. The big difference is willingness and unwillingness. However, mutation can never be termed as evolution. Mutation is only about survival. Humans have constantly mutated, and certain humans have evolved. It is about so mutation and unwillingness and mutation are connected. However, mutation, whether you are willing to evolve, mutation will still happen for you. People will mutate. But whether we will mutate towards a better human or a worse, a better being or a worse, we don't have that control then. Mutation will not necessarily mean evolution, is what I'm trying to say. And the current lifestyle and the current manner in which humans are living their lives, we can actually see this happening. Probably the previous generations were leading more happy lives and more joyful lives. And today, despite having everything, we are suffering even more. We have more intelligence and more of everything. Still, we are suffering more. So it is not just unwillingness. Mutation is the natural order of life. Whether we will be willing or whether we will be unwilling, mutation will happen. Mutation can never be compared with evolution. Evolution can be only done consciously. It's like mutation may take you ahead, may take you backward. But when we are conscious, you want to go forward. Then you don't take one step forward and two steps back. But mutation can actually take one step forward and two steps back. So it's not about willingness, it's about consciousness. And willingness is also a function of consciousness. So your friend that you're referring to, Sandeep, You just need to make him present to the fact that that if he won't evolve, then he will regress. The chances are only that. So why wouldn't he want desire to actually realize his potential? That's all he needs to see.
All right, shall I go on to the next one?
Yes, please.
This one's quite simple. This is from Prince Sharma, and it says, how can I motivate my employees under stress?
If you are motivated, you will be able to motivate your employees, Prince. It's actually as simple as that. It is your enthusiasm which always rubs on people. It is like your enthusiasm and your inner motivation is exactly like the air conditioner that you switch on in the in extreme heat. When the air conditioner is switched on, the atmosphere changes, and you suddenly start feeling better. But if you try to use external motivations, external words, you try to give them incentives and whatever else, people who even win a lottery usually remain insecure people because they're fundamentally insecure. Uh, your enthusiasm and your level of motivation, inner motivation, Prince, will rub off your people. Um, and that's the best way. Talk to them about what we have just now shared. Tell them that the beauty of is in uncertainty only, and together, if you people carry on, you can climb any mountain. What's the problem? I'm sure when your people started off in their lives, they had nothing, like most of us. And today, whatever we have has come out of the efforts and our life on the planet. Life will take care of us. So long as we keep doing the right thing, we will keep getting the right results. Focus on the right things. Right results are a natural outcome. So just remain motivated yourself. If I may just extend this answer a bit, I don't know, Susan, you're looking at the questions.
Yes,
Uh,
I am.
so may I extend the answer just a little bit?
Sure.
Uh, we've always talked of motivation as external or internal, and we feel that self motivation is the only way. And I remember talking to many people many years ago, people who were motivators and people who were coaches and people who were mentors. I remember talking to them, and everybody said, yes, self motivation is the key, and self motivation is the best form of motivation. And these are those days when, and this is my answer to you, Prince, so please listen to this carefully. These are those days when I was very less aware about the business side, and practically I had never read any books. So when I met these people, I was amazed that I was like full of awe that, my God, so many enlightened people live on this planet, and they're talking about self motivation. I'd never read about self motivation, you see, and they were talking about self motivation as the only true way. So when I met them, the first question that I asked them, that, all right, so what is your method of understanding the self? How did you understand who you are? And then suddenly they were looking at me like I'm a crazy man. So you see, the self motivation is not a technique or a concept you can get. The moment you will understand who you are, the moment you get closer to yourself, you will not need motivation, because self is always on. It is never off. It is perpetually motivated. It doesn't need any motivation. So get closer to yourself. The 4 steps that I have shared today, do those, and you'll be amazed at yourself, because self is just full of joy. It just doesn't know misery. It doesn't know worry. It can remain buoyant anywhere. So just remain closer to yourself, Prince. That's all I will say. And your team, they will just look at you, and in your presence, you will be like an air conditioner to them.
All right, the next question that I have here is, how can the hospitality sectors cope with this crisis? And I will just offer something first, because I've seen some interesting things going on. One of the things that I have seen and that I am personally contributing to, restaurants in particular are struggling right now. And some of them in my area have turned to essentially providing catering for the medical professionals who are working so hard these days. So they are staying open, but not really having diners come in, but they are still getting quite a bit of business and allowing individuals who want to help to contribute to paying for that, which I think is a really sort of interesting and innovative way to deal with this crisis.
So that's a good question. Who's asked this question, Susan?
I don't see a name.
A name, okay. So somebody anonymous. So hospitality is a very, very huge industry. My friend, we don't know which part of the industry you're referring to. And hospitality is the need for every single human. You are not suffering currently the threat to hospitality industry. You're suffering your own fear. You get rid of your fear. Hospitality will be, as has been needed since a millennia, will be needed for another millennia, as long as humans are alive. You just need to make sure that you're playing your part in the humans' need of hospitality. Whether that be food, that be hotels, that be travel ticketing, whichever part of the hospitality industry you're in, the need still remains. You think about in today's time, how can you play some kind of a role in fulfillment of the need? Because the manner in which those needs can be fulfilled, that will change, but not the need. Need will remain, and actually, post this, humans will go through a lot of emotional turmoils. Once the lockdowns are over, the real game will begin then. People won't know how to cope with the changed world. I've been watching those videos where those tunnels are being made for sanitizing people when they are entering the bus stations and the train stations or the markets. So a lot is going to change, and we have to be right now in a situation of absolute innovation. Just like a lump of moldable clay, we should be like this. Forget about your old business models. You're already a master of that. If they come to pass, you can always use them. But be prepared for everything. Just focus. As you built your business the first time ever, you basically focused on human needs. And as you focused on human needs, you were there to serve them. Your business models come out of human needs. Focus on that only.
Excellent. So the next question is seemingly directed at me, but I'll invite you to answer as well. It says, thank you for the positive perspective to the panelists. Could you expand the thought of reach out instead of retreat, not physically, but emotionally or organizationally? And I'll answer that by giving two examples, one of which is personal. So I am still a professor at Notre Dame, and I teach all of my classes via Zoom, just as we are doing right now. And it's been, I think, a really interesting experience, in part because I now have a window into all of my students' lives. I see them in their homes. I've learned a lot more about them, and they see me in my home. And while I have tended in the past to keep some sort of professional distance, in that sense, I find myself changing my approach and spending a lot more time talking to my students about how they're doing, and allowing them to ask me the same. And I think that's been a really rewarding experience and something that I might actually bring back into the classroom once this time passes. Organizationally, I'll just give a really interesting recent example of a company called Bloom Energy, which is a Silicon Valley company. that does solar-related work. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of problems these days. One of the problems that certainly is faced all over the world is the lack of proper equipment to treat COVID-19. California found that it had quite a lot of ventilators that were non-functional. And Bloom Energy, and in fact, a couple of engineers at that particular company, when the governor of California stated that this was true, they actually got in touch with the governor and said that they would find a way to fix them. Even though this is not their specialty at all, they read the manual, they fixed it, and they have in fact sent a lot of functioning ventilators back to the state of California. So this is just an example, to my mind, of a way in which if you focus on being useful and focus on what you're capable of doing, I think you might surprise yourself, and you might find new connections between your organization and other organizations.
Super example, Susan. I will take a I will go at this question by Mohit. So instead of retreating by reaching out emotionally or organizationally, what we mean basically, one of the examples that come to my mind is there are so many things that we've not been able to do when we were running our normal business. And these are endless things. I have a few examples of those kinds of things. You can do that screen sharing from your side. If you could go to the slides.
Absolutely. Let me get it up. Okay, let me do this. And
so, Mohit, I've been anticipating these kinds of questions. So we prepared a list of the possible things that you could do to reach out, to do within your organization emotionally or organizationally. Just have a look at them. These are just indicative lists. And look at the finance area. There's so much that you could be doing. I've just given an example of 8 things here. You could completely redo the procurement processes. And I know of a few companies who are doing this, and they've already reduced. I'm talking about a Fortune 50 company based out of Netherlands. And they were redoing their procurement process. There is a lockdown. Nobody's going, and they decided to redo the procurement process, and they've already saved more than 22% of the normal costs and improved the qualities, and in fact created a win-win situation with all their suppliers worldwide. Because right now, everybody can redo their procurement process. Similarly, the costing systems, you can create your crack teams to improve your margins. You could be thinking about expansions. You could be taking assets on lease, sale back options. Just need to work out so many things. Just go into the micro detailing, sit with your company experts, sit with your advisors, and so much could happen. Calculating ROI on all your direct and indirect overheads, because we've been spending money, but we never look at the ROI. You see the concept of instead of being a chief executive officer, if you become a profitability officer, you could be looking at the return on investment on each expense head, so long as you look at those direct or indirect overheads as investments, and you could be headed for major innovations there. So in the next slide, we have some more examples in the sales and marketing pillar. And currently the emotions are high on hygiene and health. So consequently, you could be looking at what are my most profitable products. Look at your data. Look at the exact data, and find out ways to sell them more. This is a time for you and your team to research. But you just cannot do that. If you go into a retreat mode, you will be paralyzed. You will be numb. And this is a time for you to get extremely proactive. Get your teams going. Even today, I was on a call with one of the biggest companies in India, and they are talking about these kinds of things with nearly, I think, 300 of their core team members, and they just want to just switch on everything, because this is a time where people are just willing, people are receptive, everybody is receptive, everyone. People who've been living in their shells right now are open for communications. So you could be doing wonders. You could be reducing your customer acquisition cost. Just discuss what is the average customer acquisition cost for you. You could be looking at what is the what can you do to enter into new markets without spending a single penny. This is a time for you to reach out to people. But if your people are uh, are emotionally unhealthy today, you can't do any of these things. That's what is possible for you. If you could move on to the next slide, there are more examples about people here. You could be really working on people's attitudes for alignment with their with the common vision of the organization. This is the best time. You could be setting examples. This is also an answer to Prince, who was asking, how do I motivate my team? You The moment you will be motivated, you will be looking at all the possibilities, and as you reach out, the emotional health will happen, and organizationally you will be setting new benchmarks and new standards. Shall we move on to the next question, Susan?
Sure. Just get back there. Right. Okay. Looks like this is a question that's directed at me, but I will certainly give you a chance to answer as well. It says that you shared examples of US companies who invested on innovation when markets crashed. With your experience in South Asia Pacific, how resilient and risk-taking do you think businesses are in this region? Also give us your perspective on expected political actions and stimulus to bring back the economy on COVID-19 once COVID-19 is behind us. I've seen the whole gamut, both in the US and in South Asia. I see people doing pretty much the exact two things I talked about, either fully in retreat, so hunkering down and preserving assets, laying off workers, etc. I see this in San Francisco right now. A lot of startups are doing that. I also see risk-taking, real risk-taking. And in terms of political actions, I think governments the world over are attempting. We are currently in what I would characterize as a demand crisis, fueled by a health crisis. Governments the world over are largely engaging in Keynesian interventions to try to fill the hole in demand that we are experiencing. I suspect that that will help to some degree once the cash actually trickles into the system. But I think on a personal level, one of the things that will be really important to bring back the economy once COVID-19 is behind us is all of the actions that we take right now to keep the economy functioning and to set ourselves up for the new economy, which we are going to create right now. Part of that can be conservative. So for instance, I have made it a point of supporting the businesses that I want to be around in the new market expansion that will inevitably happen sooner or later. I would say at a personal level, I'm trying to make sure that that happens. In terms of additional political actions, we will see what we will see. Political leaders, I think, fall into the same buckets that I've talked about. Some of them are fully in retreat. Some of them are taking bold actions. And it is my hope that between political action and personal action, we can actually get out of this just as quickly as we can.
So I don't have much to say on that particular question because I'm not an expert on American economy. I'm more a generalist and more related to how humans function. But all I can say about America is that there is an active debate which is going on about whether they should give priority to economy or to human lives. And that is a dilemma that America is going through, which is funny to most of us in India. Um but when that dilemma is there, that means the dilemma is there. Um, so people who are in favor of economy will win, uh, or whether people who are in favor of human lives will win. Only time will tell. But I think somewhere they will be able to create some kind of a balance because there are these uh, two conflicting forces. So personally, I feel human motivation eventually wins. Economies are a collection of uh, personal, individual human motivations, and we try to capture human economies through data. Uh, and when we try to capture economies through data, we are it's almost like we are trying to look at stars and trying to find out what's going to be tomorrow. Um, Look at human motivations, look at your own goals, specific goals, and as you will work with yourself and with your teams, you whether you're running a 7 million company or you're running a 70 billion company or a 100 billion company, it just doesn't matter. uh, None of us have 100% market share globally. Even if we have 30 or 40% globally, there is still that 70 or 60% market shares out there. uh, People are your greatest resources. Focus on yourself, focus on your people. This time is just a small blip and it'll go. But this is the time to keep your sanity. Don't get overly worried about what's going on in the economy, because countries were always run by people who had different motivations. And actually, humans, or normal, ordinary citizens of each country, um, always end up doing what is right for that country. So companies never serve the political masters. Companies eventually serve the human beings who live in any one of those economies. So eventually, I don't see any reason. Uh, if you will focus on yourself and you will focus on your personal motivations and your company's core intent, you will eventually succeed. There is just no two ways about it. That's the only perspective I can share.
All right. The next question asks, it states rather, the COVID-19 situation has surely challenged and upended many paradigms. That is true. And that too at all levels, individual, family, social, national, global. When, not if, we are beyond COVID-19, would any major shift at any of these levels have a lasting effect and be permanent? If yes, what are these most likely to be? I will just share a very quick answer to that, which is to say that at least in the social sciences, we talk about moments, critical junctures, moments of political, economic, and social opening. I do think we are in one right now, which means that there's a possibility for dramatic reorientation. Paradigm shift is essentially what you're talking about. I hope that certain things do not change. I hope we still want to interact with one another, not over Zoom. I hope the best things that we are as humans do not change, but I think there's a lot of room for positive change. I also don't think the best way to go about this is through prediction and trying to read the tea leaves. I personally am trying to approach it from the perspective of doing. So instead of trying to sort of figure out how I can react to what the future will be, I'm trying to create a different future. And I think that's one of the things that we are all responsible for right now, and one of the things that will actually reduce our own anxiety. If we have an idea of where we want to go, try to go there.
Very, very beautifully articulated, Susan. I am always of the view that we are the designers of our life. whether I will have a social impact or not. If I feel I will have a social impact, I think I'm fooling myself, because the world has been there much before me and it will remain after me. And so it's not about the social impact. And Sriram, thank you so much for asking that question. But my perspective is exactly what Susan's perspective is. Let's focus on designing our own lives, designing the lives of people that we are directly or indirectly responsible for. The world has always had a place for everybody, and it will continue to have a place. The paradigms will change, but I think we who are the designers of, of our lives, we are always way ahead of the change or the pace of change that happens around us. And you, Sriram, are well capable of doing that.
All right. We are almost out of time, but I think we can probably do another question or two. The first one that I see here was from Bornali, who says that could not understand the answer to Susan's question on core intent. So I guess that's for you, and maybe a reiteration of that.
Yes. I also see that there is a comment here where Shalini is saying that she will answer this question. Is that so? No.
Sure.
All right. So I will answer Bernali. The core intent, as I was speaking, Susan's question was that what if when we get to the core intent, there are conflicting intents. So as an example, at the core, when you reach, you have one intent that you recognize, that you want the person around you to respect you, and no matter how stupidly we behave, but respect must happen. And at the other level, we understand the core intent where we must love the other person unconditionally. So what if there is a conflict between these two core intents? And that was the question that Susan had asked. I'm only giving you an example. And I said, uh, core intent will never ever be in conflict. The moment you will reach to your core intent, all conflicts will be resolved. Uh, Either you will choose respect and you will produce respect, because you cannot force the other person to respect you, but you can definitely produce respect for people around you. Or you will choose love and you will make sure that you produce love for people around you. You can't force people to produce love for you. So once you will get to your core intent, and you doing the first bit of exercise of what emotions am I producing, you will become a producer. You will not become a person who's always seeking emotions from other people. And rest of the life will be an outcome of the kind of emotions you will produce rooted out of your own core intent. And that was the perspective of the answer that I was sharing. There will simply be no conflict. um, I will take this question, Susan. Homis is asking, how should one look for opportunities around COVID-19? Why don't you answer this question, Susan?
Sure. What I would say is I would look for problems. There are a lot of them. And I would try to match up. I would scan the world looking at the problems that exist and try to match with one that my skill set can solve. Not look for the immediate gain, but look for sort of a long-term investment and long-term gain. And I think that even if one temporarily does not gain, one will likely gain in the long term, even if it's a slightly expanded skill set or new contacts or what have you. There's no shortage of opportunities for doing good work right now.
I couldn't have put this better, Susan. This was super answer. So I hope, Homis, that satisfies you. And now we are at the last question. Donna Benny is asking this question. Susan, would you like to take this one?
Sure. I take this to be a question about how the food and beverage sector can handle business during a lockdown. And in particular, I take this to be a question directed at India in particular, since the curfew is fairly complete. Here in San Francisco, we are allowed to get takeout from restaurants. And in fact, and this has been making me laugh quite a lot these days, we now can get alcohol delivered as well. We can get drinks delivered from bars. I am marveling at the innovations that we come up with in this time. The question is, how can a brand come out of this situation? How will they manage in terms of money? I think one of the things that Samir said earlier was to focus on what you really need. Think about what you really need in terms of the business operations right now, and how you can perhaps make do with less, recognizing that the current situation is temporary. But I would also focus on what you can provide. Certainly there is demand for alcohol. I'm not sure about provisioning in India at this point, but think about what you have, maybe a distributional operation, facilities, and think about how you can be useful. Certainly the example I gave earlier of restaurants trying to cater to medical professionals so that they can stay at their jobs doing some really hard work right now. That might be an opportunity. And it might actually take, I'm currently assuming that the curfew in India will end sooner rather than later. So maybe the answer is just to hold tight for another 2 weeks. But if that isn't the case, then perhaps the answer is to try to reach out to regulators and think about ways in which these businesses can stay afloat and continue to service their customer bases despite the restrictions that COVID-19 has placed on us.
Yeah. Yes. So Donna, the food and beverage industry, the beer cafe example that you've taken, I'm sure many people who are tuned into the webinar, their mouths will be watering, because a lot of them have not had their visit to the beer cafe, and it's a very dear brand. If you can wait it out another couple of weeks, you shouldn't have a cause to worry. I had shared the slides of what all is possible in terms of innovating your business. I think you should focus on innovating your business, build inner strengths. And as you will build inner strengths, your business will just blossom as soon as the lockdown is over with. Keep your people alive. Make sure that that they actually, from employees, they actually become partners in your business. And there are many ways. We were discussing with our common friend Brinal. We don't have the time today to discuss what he's done in his business, but he's done certain marvelous things, and he's turned most of his people into his partners. And it's a beautiful thing to see what's possible. With food and beverage industry, a lot can happen. Focus on your distribution channels, focus on eliminating redundancies, focus on creating efficiencies, focus on eliminating pilferages, improve your processes, improve your finances, improve your procurement systems, improve the people's attitudes, talk to them. This is the best time for you, where you can actually take out time to speak with each stakeholder, each person that you employ, and each person who works in your company. This is the best time for you to do this. So thank you so much, everybody. We are 4 minutes above time, but it's been wonderful talking to all of you. And in another few minutes, all of you will be receiving an email from us. Please do send us your feedback. We are not pros at doing webinars. Few friends of ours, few well-wishers, they just came back to us and they said, why don't you offer these methodologies of remaining joyful and remaining successful at all times to as many people? And we said, why not? And that's one of our innovations that we're doing. Thank you, Susan, for taking out time. And I really cannot thank you enough. It genuinely comes from my heart. And I'm sure everybody who's attended has benefited. They will want to reach out to you, and our team, Susan, will be sending out any more questions that people will or may have from you. So do make out more time now to help.
Absolutely. I
So,
live by what I said. I'm looking for opportunities to engage with different people.
so thank you so much, and stay safe. Stay tuned. We will be coming out with more webinars, more intense webinars. Um, Many of us have written back to us that why don't we offer more practices that help people remain just joyful and attain more success. So we are thinking about all those aspects, and stay tuned.
Great. And thank you to everyone for attending and for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.